But first up, was Candace canceled by the Daily Wire?
So I had to catch up a little bit on the news. Do I play the clip of one of the other gentlemen at the Daily Wire? Let me play this right here. I'm not picking on him because I'm not picking on him. I thought this was a very I won't play the whole clip.
Grown.
Here.
You know, when I did this, by the way, the priest who baptized me said, you know, Christians won't accept you. You'll still be a Jew. And I said, well, I am. That's my race. I'm a Jew. I'm proud of my race. It's a great race. It's done many, many great things, including write the Bible. And, you know, I am a Jew. But that hasn't happened at all. Christians have welcomed me with open arms, except this Christ the King anti-Semitic crowd. Christ is the King. And one day every knee will bow and recognize it, because he's not just my king, he's king of the universe. But when you use that phrase to mean that God has abandoned his chosen people, the Jews, through whom he came into this world incarnate, and that he's broken his promises, his covenant with the Jews, you are quoting scripture like Satan does in the Bible.
I'm going to stop it there. This is why I don't discuss religion. Often. How do I get out of here? Robert, I don't discuss religion. I'm not sure who that guy is. I know he's on the Daily Wire, but I saw the clip and all that I could think of is the man converted obviously from Judaism to Christianity, literally just said Christ is king and everyone will bow the knee to him and the entire universe. But and I don't know what the politics are here, but when people say Christ is king, it's anti-Semitic. And it's all part of this whole ecosystem of Candace Owens leaving, claiming, I don't know if she claims it's retaliation. I don't know the terms of which she left, but she's no longer with the Daily Wire. People are saying it's because of her beliefs or her statements towards Israel. Others are trying to drudge up some stupid tweet that she hearted and say she's a raging anti-Semite, which I don't personally believe. But what do you know of it, Robert? What do you know of the terms of the breakup, whether or not they paid her out, bought her out, whether or not she quit so they don't have to? And what do you make of the entire kerfuffle?
Well, I think it was 6 months ago or so, we predicted right here on this show that Candace Owens was going to try to get out of her contract with the Daily Wire, and that there was and the key issue for her was, one, how does she get out of the contract without her being terminated for cause? So that she couldn't be sued, so that she has certain financial benefits secured under the contract and is not at risk of any liability. And secondly, how does she do so in such a way that she doesn't come across looking like the bad actor, that she maintains her public image and even ideally can portray herself as a victim to get people to rally behind in the process? And it's like, how would you possibly do that with the Daily Wire run by Ben Shapiro? What issue could possibly get you terminated from there in a way that you could be made to look like the victim rather than the perpetrator? I've said for some while here that, and I said at the time, that's exactly what she was going to do, that she was going to use Israel to get herself, weasel her way out of the contract. It was clear all the way back to Steven Crowder when she was busy, pimping herself out for the Daily Wire to bash Steven Crowder, that she was, or Tim Pool appearance, that it was dawning on her in live time that she didn't have such a great contract, and that Crowder had kind of exposed that. And then she saw Crowder goes to Rumble, goes to locals, and is maintaining more independence, probably doing better financially than she is, and increased influence, more influence than she had. And so she's like, oh, man. And then she sees Tucker Carlson do the same thing. And it's like, I think without doubt, she was thinking, I got to get out of this. I got to get out of this. And there was an obvious path. The path was question Israel in some manner. Now, the question is, how do you question it in a way that doesn't be a for-cause basis or severely damage her public reputation with her audience? And there you have these different constituencies that are anti-Israel. You've got the anti-Israeli left that puts Israel, because everything is through the filter of oppressor or oppressed. That's it. They know nothing else. And before 9/11, they saw Islamists as oppressors. After 9/11, they saw Islamists as oppressed. That's why you get gays for Palestine and feminists for Palestine. Things that were a meme. It should be a meme or a joke or actually legit, because the left has this oppressor-oppressed paradigm. But that wasn't going to be an appropriate place for her to go. Then you have nor would the Islamist part of the anti-Israeli movement be a very plausible path for Candace to pursue. And so then you have to look at the right. What parts of the right are critical of them? And there she had to walk a tightrope. There's a part of the right, like what Andrew Clavin is talking about, that when they say Christ is king, they mean something different than what everybody else thinks of when they hear Christ is king. Most Christians hear Christ is king. Yes, that's great. That's our Christian tradition belief. There is a percentage of people, I won't say Andrew Torba by name, but that basically when they say this, everybody knows it's of anti-Jewish and trying to spread bloodline. I think, as you pointed out, there's a difference between somebody saying Israel is committing genocide. There's an entire, when Glenn Greenwald or others, that's an entirely ideologically merited position to hold, even though I think it's factually false. That's a consistent position for them to hold without being anti-Semitic at all. That does not mean everybody who says that isn't anti-Semitic. There is a percentage of people who are. So her goal was, how do I get on the right, the anti-war right that says that but's not anti-Semitic? And there is. That's the Pat, even though Pat Buchanan was falsely accused of it, the Pat Buchanan side, the Thomas Massey side, the more libertarian side, the more anti-war side in general, that says, why are we giving money to foreign governments, period? Don't care if it's Ukraine, don't care if it's Israel, don't care if it's Colombia, Venezuela, don't care who it is. Why are we giving our money to other people, that are not our citizens? Why are we doing that? So it's a long-standing, legitimate, independent criticism that applies to everybody, of which Israel, in their view, is a principal offender because of how much money goes to them in their view. And then the second is getting entangled in the various Middle Eastern war conflicts hasn't exactly been a politically profitable path for the United States. And that's the sort of what I would call a combination of the libertarian right and the, your Dave Smith types, who's more libertarian center to libertarian left, and your Patrick Buchanan side. And the goal was she needed to get into that without getting near the Nick Fuentes of the world, knowing that the Nick Fuentes of the world would boost her, which would be just fine for Candace. I mean, Candace, I always say there's three categories. There's your real advocates, then there's your pure grifters, and then there's your hustlers. Your hustlers are part advocate, part grifter. Candace is absolutely a hustler. Do I think her views on Israel that she's been announcing over the 6 months are all that sincere? Let's just say I'm skeptical. It's just the timing. I shouldn't have been able to predict it. I shouldn't have said Candace Owens is going to use Israel to weasel out of her Daily Wire contract, right? If this was her sincerely held view. Try to find her saying this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's kind of missing, isn't it? Because Queen Candace wanted to be queen again, and she couldn't be so at Daily Wire. So I'm not believing the sincerity of her views, but it was a smart tactical decision. So, because it would drive little Benji Shapiro absolutely up a wall. It would drive many of the patrons and supporters at the Daily Wire up a wall. Because Israel is a holy cause. I mean, Ben should just go be an Israeli citizen. I get it. I don't have I understand a lot of Jewish conservatives see Israel as a existential cause. I respect that. I'm not for leveraging American resources and risking American lives for it. At the same time, of course, it's almost impossible to give tactical advice in this debate because you're either a Zionist colonizer if you say anything pro-Israel, or you're a Hamas apologist Jew hater if you say anything anti-Israel. You can't have a practical viewpoint. I would say I think your suspicion about 10-7 at the time is increasingly. I don't think Netanyahu is culpable because I think it's too big a gamble. But we look at Cui Bono, comparing Russia to this, what happened in Russia to this. The hardliners sure have used this to gain a lot of influence on policy in Israel. And the hardliners and Hamas need each other. Hamas needs the hardliners to overreact in Gaza so they can sever the Trump effort to build a disconnect between the royalist wing of the Arabist world from the Palestinian cause, and how many in the Arab world and Islamic world are no fans of Hamas. And at the same time, the hardliners need Hamas to do horrible things to justify the punitive actions they want to take in their viewpoint towards security. But, it seems like they were in bed together, frankly. I'm increasingly skeptical and suspect of whatever happened on 10-7. As soon as they were using 10-7 to sound like our American elites after 9/11 and how it's had that effect on the Israeli public, 90 to 95% don't question anything right now in Israel. It's like, and even while, what we predicted here is that a punitive campaign in Gaza would be a public relations debacle, disaster for Israel, which is what Hamas needs to maintain the money train. And if you don't think it's about the money, why don't you check out how much money is in the bank accounts of Yasser Arafat before he died, what they found out afterwards, or the Hamas? They use the Palestinian people and Palestinian cause to rake in lots of money for their own genocidal inclinations that have been the Palestinian objective from the beginning of this conflict in the 1920s. So I don't think what Candace Owens did or said was anti-Semitic, but I'll give an example of how I'm skeptical of her motives. I didn't know the ADL or anybody was coming after her, except for her telling me over and over again. So it's like, somebody's trying to elevate this issue above everybody else. So, but smart move of Candace. She now looks like she was canceled by the Daily Wire for her principled position in free speech advocacy, and she weaseled out of the contract. And now gets to be independent, announce the locals page, very quickly. Is going to be on Rumble probably very quickly. Might try to do a deal with Tucker's people. But my guess is, if you know Queen Candace, and they called her, I got that introduction from others that were close to her world in D.C. in 2018 at the Trump Hotel, and then saw her walk around and interact with people. And I was like, ooh, I get it now. She is indeed Queen Candace. It was always an uncomfortable tie for the Daily Wire. She was one of the few people who could bring in a populist element to the Daily Wire that's otherwise just a culturally conservative institution, but an establishment Republican one for the most part. She was one of the few popular personalities that had independent market value other than Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire. But they just like Crowder, it never made a lot of sense. Daily Wire is not going to be a populist publication. They're not going to push populist causes. I don't know if they've even talked about the Amos Miller case. I don't know if they've talked about the Brooke Jackson case. I mean, I from day one have not been a big fan. They interviewed me, I think, one time in total. I get more interviews from mainstream media than the Daily Wire requesting information on the Covington kids case. Ben Shapiro originally jumped on the defamation. So everybody who knows me knows I'm not a big fan of the Daily Wire and that this marriage made no sense. But credit to Candace, kind of like Steve Wynn's ex-wife. She knew how to work the divorce, and I think she did it very effectively. But I don't think the Daily Wire canceled her as much as she got herself weaseled out of a contract she didn't like and maintained her public legitimacy and can be perceived as a victim in the process. But do I believe any of her viewpoints on Israel are sincere? Let's just say I remain skeptical.
I'm going to read a bunch of the chat that came in, and there's a question in that I want to answer. Have either of you heard about the 8th grade student in Massachusetts who were arrested for sharing spicy memes in a Snapchat? Someone needs to step up and defend the First Amendment. Where is the ACLU? Stop tyranny. Well, the ACLU is too busy defending other stuff.
Anti-Christian Liberties Union, or as they called it back home as a kid, the American Common-Loving Union.
We got, you missed it. Saying Macron's wife is a trans woman puts the Daily Wire into a lawsuit threat. She bet her career on it.
Macron's not going to be suing anybody. But what is it? She wants to maintain that independence. I mean, her politics have been all over the place. And some people have honest conversions. Some people have convenient conversions. So which Candace is in, let's just say I remain a skeptic of. And she's got a hot fuse. She's all and a big ego. I mean, she's out there asking for donations. And I'm like, Candace, some of us know how much money you've made. You don't really need donations, darling.
You can never have too much, Robert.
You're not a real victim, darling.
Trump has showed us you can never have enough FU money because they can take all of it. So better,
yeah, I guess that's true. I'm just saying, of all the causes out there, there's a lot more compelling causes than Candace Owens' bank account. Is my own view.
I would just say, in terms of the law, the defamation threat, I'm not sure. I would check what France's defamation laws are, but that's a newsworthy issue that is being reported by a number of people, not just Candace. Sonia TK says, we are giving old weapons to Ukraine, not money. I think both of those statements are false, but and we took their nukes, so we owe them Budapest memorandum. I don't think it's only
that's false. That's false at multiple levels. We gave them a lot of new weapons. They just didn't work so well. Bad advertising for the defense contractors. That's why you started seeing the spin. Oh, these are really the old weapons. That's why they're not the old ones. They're not our new ones. Nothing advertises your defense product like war, but nothing advertises it badly like a poorly conducted one. We're giving them tons and tons of money. Yes, it gets laundered back into the Western deep state. And the Budapest memorandum is a ludicrous narrative. This wasn't for Ukraine. The bottom line is no one was going to recognize Ukraine, nor was the Commonwealth of Independent States. Those were Russian and Soviet missiles, and they were going to take them home because everybody wanted them to take them home. This was about forcing Ukraine to make sure that happened. That was a complete agreement. This idea that, Ukraine would have had independent nukes to defend itself, but for the Budapest Memorandum, is a preposterous claim if you know any of the history of how that got done. It's one of the many dumb lies told by the Western press about this conflict.
I'm bringing this one up here, and I'm going to read one in Rumble too, because Klavan, I didn't know who he was as a person. I didn't misunderstand his statement. I'll get to that in a second. Viva, the guy is Andrew Klavan, and he wasn't contradicting himself. He was essentially agreeing with Barnes, but from a Christian perspective. I know what Klavan was saying. He's saying people say Christ is king as an antagonistic thing, and therefore it's anti-Semitic. But the problem is the statement does not become anti-Semitic because someone who might be anti-Semitic uses it in a provocative way. And so you're not saying the statement is anti-Semitic. You're saying the person who's making it is, and that's a different statement than saying.
And the pro-Israeli side keeps taking the bait on all this. They keep these hate speech, idiotic laws being passed in places like South Dakota and Florida that are meant basically to suppress speech, censor speech concerning Israel. And it's preposterous. And you've got to draw the distinction between the people that are actually genocidal in their hatred towards Jews and people who disagree with Israel. Those are two very different things. But the pro-Israeli side refuses to recognize the difference. And they say if anybody that's anti-Semitic uses any particular phrase or argument, then anybody who then uses that phrase or argument is anti-Semitic. That's patently illogical. That's completely irrational. And it's obvious. I disagree sharply with Glenn Greenwald on Israel. I found him to be utterly unreliable on Palestinian news sources. He would tell me something was true. I would believe it, then research it, find out it's another ludicrous fraud. It's like the latest one. Supposedly, Israel was using drones to attack civilians. Maybe. I just, in my experience for 20 years, have seen those stories prove to be false over and over again.
This is the story.
Like maybe it's true. Alex Jones is sharing it. Other people are sharing it. But my advice to all of them is, look, I've been burned by it. I promoted some things that were critical of Israel, believing Glenn Greenwald, who's otherwise reliable. Turns out on Palestine and Israel, he's just not.
Think of all
the leftist propaganda we get here. Black churches burned or Native Americans being attacked in Canada. In the modern age, you have to just be real skeptical, always be skeptical of a pro-Palestinian victim story.
Well, I saw Jones share the same clip, 4 Palestinians killed by drones. Like, do we know if those people who were killed were perpetrators of October 7th? I mean, I don't know anything what's going on with that. I'm not sharing it. I'm not contradicting it.
And I'm not defending Israel reflexively. I think I've said from day one, their strategy to clear out Gaza is going to politically backfire. And the biggest problem they have isn't the soldiers in Hamas. The biggest problem they have is the Arab and Islamic unity against Israel. And if they could sever that unity, undermine that unity, then they could, I think, achieve lasting peace. That was Trump's strategy. Separate the royalists from the religious hardliners within the Islamic and Arab worlds who don't really like Hamas or Fatah or PLO anyway, and especially don't like Hamas, and distrust Iran that wants to be the religious and geopolitical dominant force in the Middle East by severing their support for Hamas and the Palestinian elite cadre that only uses its population as cannon fodder to line their pockets and support their genocidal agenda towards Israel, which goes back over a century. For those people that forget, the very founder of the Palestinian movement kept begging to join the Nazis since 1933. I mean, as soon as they took power, he was writing letters to the German, please let me be a Nazi. Please let me be a Nazi. Please let me be a Nazi. That's who they are. So I'll never be sympathetic to this kind of Palestinian cause that follows in that ancestral legacy. At the same time, that doesn't mean tactically or strategically creating a bunch of victims is good for Israel, a bunch of Arab Muslim victims. There's going to be innocent people dead, period. And a lot of them when you bomb and raid and use tanks and all the rest throughout Gaza. So I'm still critical of that policy, not sold that it's necessary for self-defense. But you can have a balance between the two, except not in the court of public opinion, because everything's virgin or whore in this context. You're either a saint or the devil. Honest objectivity is not allowed. And Candace Owens did a brilliant job of exposing that. And you're right. What all these people took the bait of is, I mean, when you're calling Candace Owens anti-Semitic, that's kind of dumb. That discredits yourself. That doesn't discredit her.
And the weakest argument is, well, she's got the support of the Groypers and the this and the that. It's like, all right. Who cares? I mean, sometimes they endorse people as sabotage.
Anybody who's anti-Israel. Big shock. That doesn't make the person who's anti-Israel a Jew hater. Glenn Greenwald is not a Jew hater. Rand Paul and Thomas Massey's skepticism towards aspects of Israeli involvement is clearly ideologically rooted. It is not at all, by any means, anti-Semitic. As some groups on that side, they hurt themselves by mixing and matching. It's like what's happening on college campuses. They have a legitimate right to object to their kids getting harassed and stalked and threatened. They don't have a legitimate right to object to speech. And they should be able to separate the two. And their refusal to do that just damages their own cause, their own agenda. Both sides making mistakes in this political conflict.